and also hope that you are having a good day so far. All right, so today we're going to be doing our grade 5 English lesson on similes and metaphors. So we're doing our grade 5 English lesson on similes and metaphors. All right, so before we start with our lesson, you're going to log in to aplusstudents.ca. You're going to log in with your username as well as your password. And then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 5. All right, so once we have selected grade 5, when we get to the chapter list, right, we are going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of similes and metaphors. Similes and metaphors. Grade 5. Over there. All right. So once we in the chapter of similes and metaphors, under the chapter we're going to focus on the lesson on determine the meanings of similes and metaphors, and then to identify similes and to identify metaphors. So our chapter is similes and metaphors. And our lessons that we're going to be focusing on is to determine the meanings of similes and metaphors, as well as to identify similes and metaphors. All right, so we're going into our first lesson, which is to determine the meanings of similes and metaphors. All right, so similes and metaphors, right, are figures of speech. So similes as well as metaphors are figures of speech. And these figures of speech, they compare two things that are not actually alike. So they compare two things that are not alike. And then we get a simile, right? So a simile compares two things. It compares two things by saying that one is like the other. So it's either like the other or as the other, right? Similes often use the word like or as. So similes and metaphors are figures of speech that compare to things that are not actually alike. So the things that they are comparing are not alike. It is literally different things that are being compared to one another. And when it comes to a simile, right, a simile compares two things by saying that one is like the other, which means that when it comes to simile, similes often use the word like or as. So when comparing two things, when it comes to similes, we use words like, we use words as. For example, my sister runs like a cheetah. A girl and a cheater is totally different things, right? They are not even like the other. The one is not like the other. But my sister runs like a cheetah, right? Which means that she is comparing the speed in which a sister runs like a or to a cheetah. The sister's running and a cheetah's running are compared using the word like. And also, remember, a cheetah is known for running very fast. So the simile means that the sister also runs fast. So that is why she says, my sister runs like a cheetah. Because a cheetah is very fast, and she is actually making mention that her sister is also as fast as a cheetah. The cat's fur was as dark as night. So, which means that the cat's fur and the night are compared using the word as. Remember, we said with similes, similes uses words like or as, right? To basically compare two things. So the cat's fur and the night is being compared, which means that the night is usually dark, right? At night it's dark, which means that the cat's fur is probably like dark. So the night is dark, so the simile means that the cat's fur is also black. So similes, right? We said similes compare to things, and we use words like or we use words like as. So like and as when we compare two things. Then we have a metaphor. And a metaphor, it compares two things by saying that the one of them is the other. So metaphor, it compares two things by saying that the one, or saying that one of them is the other. And unlike similes, metaphors don't use words like or as. So metaphors do not use words like, and they do not use words as. Remember, but the simile, we use words like or as to show comparison. For example, the snow formed a blanket over the town. The snow formed a blanket over the town, which means that the snow and the blanket are compared without the word like or as. All right. A blanket, right, is a large piece of cloth that completely covers a bed. So the metaphor makes the reader imagine that the snow becomes a blanket covering the town completely. So that is how they make the comparison. So once again, we have similes and metaphors. And similes and metaphors are figures of speech that compare two things that are not actually alike. A simile compares two things by saying that one is like the other. And we use words like or as. And then we have a metaphor which compares two things by saying that the one of them is the other. So when it comes to metaphors, we do not use words like, or we do not use words as. So like and as we do not use. All right. All right. So what is the meaning of the metaphor? So after playing in the snow, my fingers became ice cubes. So after playing in the snow, my fingers became ice cubes. Meaning, if we compare it to ice cubes are hard and ice cold, and you cannot move ice cubes. So after playing in the snow, my fingers became ice cubes. So we need to basically give the meaning of the metaphor. So basically, when it comes to ice cubes, remember we said that your fingers become hard, right? It becomes ice cold, still specifically because of the weather. And the metaphor makes it easy. Imagine the fingers became ice cubes, so they were cold and hard. And in other words, they were hard to move. They were as ice cold and stiff as a ice cube. What is the meaning of a simile? All right, so Mr. Eric is like an encyclopedia. So Mr. Eric is like an encyclopedia. So an encyclopedia is like a dictionary. So Mr. Erickson is like an encyclopedia. And in encyclopedias and dictionaries and stuff, we have meanings and facts, right? Which means that Mr. Eric is like an encyclopedia, means that Mr. Eric is someone who knows many facts. All right. So your new house is a castle. Your new house is a castle, which means that we are referring or comparing someone's house to a castle, right? So we're comparing someone's house to a castle, meaning that the house is maybe big and beautiful, because usually a castle is very big. All right. Also, when it comes to your house is a castle, right? We can either show that the house is very big. Also, a castle is made up of that brown face bricks. So sometimes the bricks of the house or the color of the house will also kind of give an idea that it looks like a castle, for example. And the house is very big. So the metaphor, your new house is a castle. It basically just means that, the house is really big. The house is probably made of bricks, or it is basically, sometimes it's even the shape, but it's not necessarily a castle. And that is why we call it metaphors. And remember, we said similes and metaphors are figures of speech that compare to things that are not actually alike. So, as much as with similes we use words like and as, but it's not a like. So, to figure out the meaning of a metaphor, we need to think what the house might have in common with a castle. So, castles are huge and fancy buildings. All right, so now we need to determine the meanings of similes and metaphors. And if we get to the test, if we get to the test of metaphors and similes, or similes and metaphors, it is, sorry, what is the meaning of this simile? Now we need to say what is the meaning of this simile. My mother's hands are like silk. Is it option one, my mother's hands are soft, or my mother's hands are small? So my mother's hands are like silk. So if it is my mother's hands are like silk, so my mother's hands are like silk. Similes do use like and as, yes, but now they're saying my mother's hands are like silk. So we now need to basically say what the meaning is of my mother's hands are like silk. Is it my mother's hands are soft, or my mother's hands are small? So we need to give the meaning of that simile, not the meaning of simile. Is it my mother's hands are soft, or the mother's hands are small? Yes. So if we say that my mother's hands are like silk, then we can say my mother's hands are soft, because soft and silky is being compared to one another. Now we need to find the meaning of the metaphor. The moon was a silver dollar in the sky. The moon was a silver dollar in the sky. Does it mean that the moon was round and bright? Or does it mean that the moon was visited by astronauts? So the moon was silver. So does it mean that the moon was round and bright? If we say that the moon was like a silver dollar, or the moon was visited by astronauts. So the moon was a silver dollar in the sky. Does it mean that the moon was round and bright, or the moon was visited by astronauts? All right, so in this case, the moon was silver dollar in the sky, then we can maybe say that the moon was round and bright. Because remember, a dollar is round and most times it is shiny, right? All right. What is the meaning of a metaphor? Whenever I'm having a hard time, Mrs. McKinney is my rock. So whenever I'm having a hard time, Mrs. McKinney is my rock. Does it mean that Mrs. McKinney is dependable? Or Mrs. McKinney is a stone statue since she is the rock? So whenever I'm having a hard time, Mrs. McKinney is my rock. Does it mean that Mrs. McKinney is dependable, meaning that she can always go to to whoever? Or does it mean that Mrs. McKinney is a stone statue? All right, so which means that she is a very dependable person. Well done. Yes, well done. The little boys, the little boys, the little boy's shout was like a lion's roar. So the little boy's shout was like a lion's roar. Does it mean that the little boy's shout was loud or the shout was dangerous? So we need to compare by saying if it was either too loud or it was dangerous. This is now the little boy's shout was like a lion's roar. And then we can safely say that the little boy's shout was loud. So he had a very loud shout. All right, so well done. Your new house is a castle. Your new house is a castle. So we need to write the meaning of the metaphor. Your new house is a castle. Does it mean that the house is made of brick or it is really big? Which means that we can say that the house is very big. Because remember, a castle is big, right? A castle is very big, it is spacious. So if they compare your house to a castle, then it means that you have a really big house. So your new house is a castle. So we can say that your house is really big. All right. The playground is always a zoo at lunchtime. So the playground is always a zoo at lunchtime. So does it mean that the playground is near the middle of the zoo, or the playground is a place with lots of action? So the playground is always a zoo at lunchtime. Does it mean that the playground is near the middle of the zoo, or the playground is a place with lots of action? All right, so we're gonna say it is a place with lots of action. Because if we say it's like a zoo, or it's always a zoo, then it means that there's a lot of action going on. Kids are running around, they are laughing, they are playing, right? Which means that lots of action are taking place, not in the middle of a zoo. And then what is the meaning of a simile? The girl climbs like a monkey. Doesn't mean that the girl is climbing with her monkey, or the girl is good at climbing. So the girl is climbing with her monkey, or the girl is good at climbing. So we need to give the meaning of the simile. The girl climbs like a monkey. All right, so basically it means that the girl is good at climbing. It doesn't mean that she is walking with a monkey. Doesn't make her a monkey. The traffic moved like honey dripping off a spoon. So the traffic moved like honey dripping off a spoon. Doesn't mean that the traffic moved away from the spilled honey, or the traffic moved slowly. So is the traffic did the traffic move like honey dripping off a spoon? Does it mean that the traffic moved away from the spilled honey, or the traffic moved slowly? We need to choose one of those answers. The traffic moved away from the spilled honey, or the traffic moved slowly. So in this case, we can say if it is honey dripping off a spoon, then we can say it is the second option, which means that the traffic moved slowly. All right. Now that is determining the meanings of similes as well as metaphors. Before identifying similes as well as metaphors. So on the left hand side, we have similes and the meaning of similes, and on the right hand side, we have the meaning of metaphors. Similes. So similes are comparing two unlike things using the words like and using the words as, right? And examples are that the trees stood still as giant statues. And then the train whistle while it while what the train's whistle was like a sad song, and then quiet as a dream. Then we have cold as icy hands on your back. And then the snow was as white as smoke. And then we also have an example of lifted off like a shadow. Then we have metaphors, right? And metaphors are comparing two unlike things by using is, are, were, was. And these are linking verbs. We don't use, in metaphors, they don't use words like as and but. So if you see that it has as and but, like for the metaphor, then that is wrong. The dog bark is strong. the moon's face is a silver mask, right? And then we have you examples of metaphors. It is comparing two unlike things, unusual. And then comes to similes and metaphors once again. Similes are two of the most famous methods that work very well, right? Widely used by writers to create mental images for their readers and make their own text more lively and interesting. So, similes, when you use a simile, you say that something is like or as something else. And when it comes to metaphors, right? And since when you paint a picture by saying that something is something else, you can use a metaphor. All right. And remember, we said similes are two of the most methods that work very well, right? And both of them are widely used by writers to create mental images for their readers and to make their text lively and interesting. And there we have a few examples of similes as well as metaphors. So, how do you exactly know what is in front of you, right? So, a simile or a metaphor, when you see one, if there is as or like in the sentence, then it's simile. So, whenever it is as or like within a sentence, then you must know it is a simile. But if it's just a comparison without any helping words, then you can say it is a metaphor. All right. Now we're going into our next lesson. And once again, similes and metaphors, they are figures of speech that compares two things that are not actually alike. And we said a simile compares two things by saying words like or as. And then we have a metaphor that compares two things by saying that one of them is the other. And unlike similes, metaphors don't use the word like, and they do not use the word as. So now we need to say if the sentence is simile or metaphor. Miss Logan is kind and her heart is gold. So the year we can say this is a metaphor. So this is a metaphor. Miss Logan is kind and her heart is gold. The football soared through the air. So the football soared through the air like a rocket. So the football soared through the air like a rocket. We need to say if that is a simile or if it is a metaphor. And if we look at the word like, The like in that sentence or in that text will tell us that it is a simile. Remember, we said with a simile, we use words like and we use words as. So when we compare two things, like for example, the football soared through the air like a rocket. So we are comparing it by using like. So that is a simile. So similes. Her eyes are as blue as the cloudless sky. Her eyes are as blue as the cloudless skies. We need to say if that is a simile or metaphor. Her eyes are as blue as the cloudless sky. And if we look at the wording of the sentence, as is there, and we say that as and like it is similes. So her eyes are as blue as the cloudless sky. So we're going to say this is also a simile. So this is a simile. Remember, we say that with similes we use words like as and we use words like, right? And with metaphors we don't. Let us go to our test. All right. So now we need to say when uses a metaphor. So this is now where we are being put to the test where we gonna have to identify either if it's simile or metaphor. So which sentence uses a metaphor? So if we look at the two sentences, the cat's silver eye were two shiny coins. The cat's silver eye are two shiny coins. And the other option is the cat's silver eyes were like two shiny coins. So if we were to so the word like in the sentence tells us it is a simile, which means that we will go with the first option, which is the silver eye with two shiny coins. Which uses a simile, which uses a simile. The running children are a stampede of houses. So, which is simile? Is it the running children are stampede of the house, or the children ran but like a stampede of houses? So the children they ran by like a stampede of horses. Whereas the first option, the running children are stampede of horses. So which one is a simile? And we can say that the second one is a simile. All right. And remember we said that is a simile because of the word like. Similes have words like or as on you. So now we need to say, does a sentence use simile or metaphor? The sunburn was a fire that spread across my back. Is that a simile or is that a metaphor? Mm-mm. So the sunburn was a fire that across my back. So we're going to say that's a metaphor. And then which sentence uses a metaphor? Remember we said within a metaphor there's no words like or as. The baby fish in the aquarium are tiny speak. Or the baby fish in the aquarium are as tiny as specks. All right. So which one is aquarium? We can say some is saying metaphor. So the baby fish in the aquarium are as tiny as specks, or the baby fish in the aquarium are tiny specks. We can say are as tiny as specks. The baby fish in the aquarium are tiny specks. Let's put the first one. Because remember, we are comparing. So it is tiny specks. And then does the sentence use a simile or do they use a metaphor? Luther swam with ease across the swimming pool like a dolphin. And we can say this is a simile. So like a dolphin. And we can say that is a simile. Like a dolphin. We are making the comparison. And then, which sentence uses a simile? Mr. Cormick's long legs were sunflower stalks. Or Mr. Cormick's legs were as long as sunflower stalks. So we're going to say, if we need to use a simile, right? Were sunflower stalks or as long as sunflower stalks. So as long as sunflower stalks. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on similes and metaphors. And remember, when it comes to similes, we are comparing, yes, we are comparing more than one thing, but when it comes to similes, similes uses words like or as within the sentences, whereas metaphors does not do that. All right, so basically, that is the end of our chapter or our lesson on similes and metaphors. Thank you very much for joining the class. I really hope you have an amazing evening further. Goodbye.